Right, shall we start? Hello everybody, thanks for coming to this afternoon session. I hope it's going to be really good because you're going to see some wonderful stuff. I'm just chairing it, so I'm just going to annoy you for the first minute or so and introduce the main speakers and then get out of the way, frankly. I'm going to be introducing Jessie Armstrong from the creative media team, who's going to start by sort of showcasing the stuff that you're going to see later on in this session. We've got Rianne from Hispanic Studies, who's going to be talking about creative video for getting across sort of literature and stuff like that. We've then got Millie from APS, who has got a whole module where students are creating sort of visual stuff in order to get forward scientific concepts. We've got Navdeep from the management school, whose students are making creative objects in order to critique marketing strategies. And we've also got sort of now Neil's hiding in the audience, and we're dragging him in as required for some of the stuff from BMS. So I'm going to get out of the way, let Jessie introduce the whole concept. Hopefully, if I can sort of chair it quick enough, we'll have some time for some Q&A afterwards and explore some of the tensions probably in between creativity and letting your students run wild to the fact they have to hand something in and have it assessed at the end, I think is what most people worry about, and how to support them. But otherwise, I'm going to clear off and let Jessie take the stage. Oh, if you've got any questions, by the way, hashtag TELFest, and I'll pick them up on my laptop and feed them in.
Hello, yep. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Jessie and I work for the creative media team. So we're based here in the Diamond, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do and how that works with academics modules, and then show a little trailer effectively of the work which my colleague students have created this year. So creative media, a brief overview as to what we do. So we basically offer the facilities and the resources for producing media content. So we offer training and support for both staff and students. And we also offer bespoke training. So if you have any ideas for a media project which might work well with any of your academic modules, speak to us and we can tailor our training to work with your academic needs. We also offer advice on legal issues in media, which is a very key point as well. You have to make sure your media is legitimate and copyright free to use. And we work with course leaders to embed creative media training into modules. So what we've done is we've made sure that all the creative media work which we do works alongside my academic colleagues' modules, so it meets your aims and objectives and outcomes and gets the most from the academic perspective out of that. So you guys don't have to worry too much about the technical side of that. We can take care of that, and it will still follow the objectives, aims and outcomes of your academic modules. So I'm going to show you a quick little video of the highlights of this year's creative media in the Diamond.
Creative media in the Diamond has been running since September 2015, and we've already run over 100 workshops for both staff and students. And more than 1,000 media projects have been created using our professional-grade software and equipment. Over 3,000 items of kit have been loaned to students to create their projects, which is over 35,000 hours of bookings that have been made through My Rooms and Resources. Our media suites have had over 20,000 hours of usage. The following shows just a small handful of the projects students have...
I'm going to pause it at that point because I'm going to show you the highlights specifically relating to my colleagues' projects in a moment. So I'm going to pause at that point. Have any of you actually had a little tour of the creative media facilities upstairs yet while you've been here at TELFest? Show of hands. Or which my colleagues at the back have? Yeah. Right. So 1 second. There we go. So the type of media that we've actually created, or our students have created while working with creative media, we've had a huge range of material created this year, including short documentary videos, which along the lines of what Millie's students have been producing. We've had short drama and fiction, such as what Rianne's students have produced for Hispanic Studies. We've had flipped learning content produced by academics as well, so you'll hear a lot of talk about flipped learning this week. And again, academic staff can use the facilities over in the computer centre, which is the staff version of what we have here, to create any flipped learning content you might want to create. We've had people create instructional videos. I'm actually running a series of workshops in the near future for engineering who are going to be creating instructional videos for the use of their labs. Photography, we've had people doing photography assignments and so forth. 2D animation, stop frame animation, TV studio productions. There's even a fully working TV studio upstairs. YouTube blogs, which some students have set up a Feminists in Medicine YouTube channel recently, and that's apparently going quite well. We've had video presentations, so not just videos in traditional format, but you can effectively record a presentation, which therefore archives that in a lot better way than doing a presentation to an audience without recording it. So you can use the TV studio for that too. We've had people recording video interviews, audio interviews and producing podcasts. So as you can see, the range is quite wide. You know, again, your students can produce any of that material which you might see fits into your modules. Your imagination's the limit. We've generally got the kit to do pretty much anything you can imagine. So here are some clips from my colleagues' modules I'm going to quickly show you before handing over to them. This is giving an idea of the work which is produced. I won't show you every single submission because there is hours and hours worth in total. So here are some of the short versions of the media produced this year by my colleagues here.
Una tarde parda y fría de invierno. Los colegiales estudian. Monotonía de lluvia tras los cristales.
Todos sabemos que lo hiciste.
Todos sabemos que te gusta él.
Querer no es hacer.
Eres tan débil que nunca sigues a tijeras. ¡Qué vergüenza!
¡Te voy a pegar una paliza!
¡Déjame! ¡Silencio! ¡Qué escándalo es este en mi estudio!
Apple Music was released back in the end of June 2015 and recently boasted having 6.5 paid, 8.5 free, meaning 15 million subscribers.
Apple have done their usual trick of taking an already existing product and attempting to improve it in order to make the perfect product. We've conducted a SWOT analysis covering Apple Music's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats.
In 2009, business management graduate Nitin Passy founded Misguided, an online clothing retailer for the quirky, confident, chic and fierce, aimed at those who aren't afraid to take a risk when it comes to fashion and always one step ahead of the latest trends.
The greatest influence on consumer behaviour and problem recognition is motivation. Misguided Active insights its customers with motivation to seek activewear that is low in price and on trend, available on a platform that they are familiar with and associated with a brand that they trust and endorsements who they desire to be like.
You'll nail it this time. Yeah. You'll nail it this time.
Since their introduction in 1876, the Grace Girls have become an iconic part of our great British landscape. They're in our parks, they're in our gardens, but they do cause a lot of damage despite their cute and familiar presence.
So one of the things that we're working on in the lab at the moment is we're trying to understand the relationship between the bedbug and some bacteria that live inside its body.
Research into these amazing animals and their incredible anatomy could be the key to diagnosing serious diseases earlier. The long-term goal is to create a bionic nose that GPs can have in their surgeries. The bionic nanonose uses a patient's urine sample to detect the presence of cancerous cells. Using proteins similar to the receptors in a dog's nose, the nanonose can differentiate between the protein levels of a healthy or diseased sample. If research continues to be funded, these little guys' noses could be the future in the battle against cancer.
I thought I'd leave you the little moment, you know, why not? So if you have any questions after my colleagues have spoken, then feel free to speak to myself or my colleagues at the back there who belong to the creative media team as well about how we can work with you to basically use video assessments or any form of media assessments for your modules. So I'm going to hand over to Rian now.
Okay, thanks Jesse. As Chris said, I'm Rian Davis from Hispanic Studies, and I first started experimenting with filmmaking because I was concerned that the students weren't engaging with the study of literature. One student in a survey described it as torture. And up until then, what I've been doing is experimenting with film using inquiry-based learning exercises relating to a film version of Boomla's Tristana. And it was actually Claire Allen, who was based in what is nowadays called Let's, who came up to me and said, why don't you go one step further and get the students to make their own films? So I thought that's completely impossible. But Claire, being a professional film producer previously, agreed to come on board, and therefore we went ahead with that. I already knew, sorry, I should have got my PowerPoint up first. I already knew that films are an excellent catalyst for class discussions, and as in the case of a lot of children's literature, you find that they will serve as a route into reading. Now, on this module, the students look at 3 works, Donna Perfecta, La Casa de Benalba, and Te Me Quieres Amor, which come from a range of different genres. We've got novel, play, short stories, and they're also from different periods. They've also all been adapted for the screen. And what the students do in semester 1 is they study the professional project alongside the original text, and then in semester 2 they're asked to choose one of the works and make a 5-minute film from a short sequence. In so doing, what I'm asking them to focus on is the difference between the genre of novels, plays, short stories and films, and also look at the universality and modernity of the works. My basic aims are quite simple: to get the students to look at the literature and the films closely and to enjoy studying them. I also hope they would start to think creatively and gain some transferable skills. Through filmmaking, I think the students enjoy quite a low pressure environment that's conducive to creativity. Now, the term fun can sometimes seem to be rather frivolous, and people sort of shy away from it in an educational context, but I think literature is meant to be entertaining, and people often forget that. Group work is also really important because they're working together with other people of the same level, same intellectual calibre, and they really enjoy sharing each other's ideas. Now, as you can see there, there's no tutor at all, and I found that as a module tutor, when teaching in this manner, I've had to learn to step back. I'm a facilitator, I'm there to support, I'm not there to preach. And I admit that that was pretty difficult at the beginning. I also had to learn, and I'm still learning, a great deal from people like Jessie and the creative media team that have worked with me. So what I've found is that it's very much a partnership, and that I would struggle to advise the students on practical matters, but as Jessie said, they take care of that. So they come to me and say, we want to use a GoPro. Go and talk to Jessie, and Jessie comes in and advises them. So therefore, I think our skills complement each other in the sense that I can advise them on the literary and historical aspects, and Jessie's there to help them put their ideas into practice and make them reality. Now, students have a lot of responsibility. They make all the choices. You can see there, they are out in all weathers, they are dictating to the actors how they should actually perform, they're choosing locations, choosing sequences, camera angles, you name it, it's all up to them. And I'm not there as an instructor, but there to ask them questions about their choices, to sort of make them think again sometimes, think about the symbolic dimensions of what they're doing. And I do find that they're quite anxious at the beginning, but these are level 3 students, so they are used to being probed, and they are generally more experienced in terms of being able to think independently. And towards the end, they do get very enthusiastic about that autonomy. Now, the assessment's designed to foster creativity. We're not training the students to be professional filmmakers, and I think this might be where I differ from Navdeep and Millie. So we don't award them a mark for their films. Instead, what we do is place an emphasis on the process. The film is an experiment. At the end of semester 2, they assess each other's skills, looking at their contributions, project management, time management, etc. And they submit a portfolio. I've got an example here if anybody wants to see it later. And they produce an essay on the challenges involved in turning a piece of written text into a film. And they also produce diaries recording their aspirations, their ideas, their reflections, what went wrong, what went right, storyboards and scripts. Interestingly, even though the film isn't actually awarded a mark, you can see from this photo that it doesn't remove the desire for the film to be a major success. Overall, the outcomes have been very positive. I've found that the students benefit enormously from the opportunity to turn literature into film. And this year, as you saw, we had a pre-Civil War play turned into a Jeremy Kyle show. And we've also got another film that was taken from a short story and the students focused on the trauma of war and incorporated elements from Schindler's List. So, you know, the imagination knows no bounds. There's clear evidence in the portfolios that it helps them to understand the literature better, and that's been reflected in the questionnaires, and I've given you a few examples on this PowerPoint. It seems to me that understanding comes through their involvement, their enjoyment, and a much more active way of learning through filmmaking. It also offers the quieter, less academic students to come forward, to be more confident and to display their talents. They work harder, but they really enjoy themselves, and interestingly, and I think it's quite important for me, they stop worrying and obsessing about the marks they're going to get at the end of the course and instead enjoy the process of learning. Most importantly for me, what happens is the students come to think creatively and take ownership. So it's very much their work, as this questionnaire said. I've learned so much. When it's all your own ideas, it gives you a lot more motivation to make it work. And the final results of film I'm really proud of. And hopefully it goes without saying that as a module tutor, I'm also really proud of the way that they now engage with the literature and come up with some fascinatingly innovative ideas and interesting films. I have to admit, it's a roller coaster, but it's really rewarding and it's a really enjoyable way to teach. Thank you, Jessie, and thank you, Creative Media, and I will count on your future collaborations. Thanks.
Okay, so mine's going to be a bit more informal. Personally, I find PowerPoint presentations, I think we do enough of those, but thank you for your presentation. So just about my module, so I'm from the management school, I'm a lecturer of marketing, and I'm the module leader for digital marketing, which is a third year undergraduate module. It is a relatively large module, it's got about 90 students, and it's an elective module. So the students select if they'd like to take the module. So it was developed last year and it was the first time that it was run. And I guess the main driver for me for having a video presentation was the idea that actually digital marketing is obviously the way forward, and as marketers we're moving more towards video content and it's less about print and text. And so actually, as third year and final year students, I'm also preparing them for life beyond university. And as we go into advertising and marketing, key skills in the advertising industry are things to do with video editing and production. So I got in touch with Jessie around probably last summer, and that's when I started writing the module. So the module had two components. It had a 70% video presentation, 20 minutes long, and the other component was a 30% individual written essay, so a traditional essay. The module ran for 10 weeks, and I worked quite closely with the creative media team to, first of all, myself and Jessie developed bespoke training. So they had the lectures with me, which were, traditional lectures, but they then had sessions that they could attend, which were based on video production, video editing, screencasting, based in Diamond. They were voluntary, and surprisingly, they were well attended to the point that we had to then put on extra sessions. And we were really pleased about that, because what it showed was that students were being proactive to what they were wanting to learn how to develop videos, edit, and the different skills that were really needed. So just a bit about the assignment. So the assignment essentially asked them to critically analyse a digital marketing strategy for a product or service launched in 2015. So what I first did is ask them to get into groups of maximum of 6 self-selected groups, because I just think that students tend to work better when they're self-selected rather than the module leader enforcing them to work with students they might not necessarily get along with. So once I'd set the title, I then asked each group to come up with a different product or service. So we had the example of Apple Music. We had a lot of tech-based products. Apple Watch seemed to be a big, so there were a lot of Apple products, but what I did make sure is that every group had a different product or service. And then in terms of, once I decided the product, the next stage was then that I gave them quite a clear structure. So I was pretty key on the things that I wanted. So I wanted the description of the product and the service, or the service that they were analysing. I also wanted some kind of overview of the company and the consumers that were being targeted. But the key was the analysis and the critique of the digital marketing strategy. So I set the coursework quite early on. And so it really got them to start thinking. So about second week of term, I set the assignment so they knew what to kind of look out for in terms of when I was presenting and delivering lectures. The key thing here, though, was to move beyond description and to apply and embed theory and relevant concepts, models and frameworks. So I'd often point to concepts and frameworks that were relevant. Now what I tended to find is that because 20 minutes seems like a long time, but actually it wasn't, to analyse an entire digital marketing strategy. So what I asked them to do is focus on 3 to 4, a maximum of 4 different channels. So when I talk about different channels, it could be email, social media, etc., etc. Some of the challenges that I actually faced was how to kind of reference, and so that's quite a big thing. So how do we kind of reference academics? And so what you sometimes found is in one of the examples that Jessie did give, that the references were running along the bottom. Others decided to put the references, the list of references, as a list of credits like you'd normally see in a film. Generally, I found when I looked at the feedback, one of the things that I've implemented for this year was the idea that actually at the time, it was 25%, the video accounted for 25% of the module weighting. Sorry, not 70, 25%. And actually, what I've done for this year is increase that to 30%. So I was quite conscious that as final year students, they don't want group coursework to have a large weighting, because they feel that actually you're almost taking the control away from them, and that they want the majority of the module grade to be a reflection on their individual performance rather than the group. And so this year I've actually increased it to 30, and there was a bit of pushback from the external examiners, because my external examiner tended to like the group coursework to be weighted quite low, but actually the time and effort that's taken, I think it deserved the extra 5%, so I've given it 30% just to keep that balance. Other things that I kind of found was in terms of techniques, the techniques were quite wide-ranging. So they weren't necessarily marked for their creativity. I was more about content. So some students did use screencasting, which is essentially this idea, Jessie, forgive me if I'm wrong, but essentially using PowerPoint and talking over, so recording a PowerPoint and then doing the talk over. And that wasn't a problem. So in the video that Jessie did show, that those are some of the most creative. When they were talking, they were doing the acting, but they weren't. But the main key, when I was putting together the assessment criteria, it was all based on the application of theory, their analysis, their critique, and their general understanding. And I think that's what sets it apart from being marked on creativity. Other things, so the content was key. And also, I felt that as a module, and it being digital marketing, I felt that it needed to be quite innovative. So it was quite interesting that the partnership formed between the management school and creative media was the first. And so my module was the first module to use digital assessments. And what's quite interesting is since then, since people have been hearing about my assessments and I've shared the assessments with colleagues, we've started to then have other academics use video assessments in different aspects of the business school, like strategy and accounting and finance, interestingly. Other things, so I was quite conscious as well, because they were third years, that I wanted to give them skills that they wouldn't learn from other modules. And I think they get a lot of, especially in the management school, they are taught, they already have an understanding, I would hope, by third year, how to write essays and do the critical thinking in a written context. But the presentation skills and the creativity. I don't think they often get that as much, and so that's what I was preparing them for. And I was quite conscious that a lot of the students that picked my module were going into advertising, digital marketing, and they kind of needed these skills. And I think the course that Jessie put together was quite nice because that added almost an extra line to their CVs, that they had this bespoke media, video training. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. I think I've covered. So the key thing about the student feedback was the weightings, that they thought that the time that they'd put in required a higher weighting, and so I've included that 30. Other things were that the skills, again, they wouldn't have learnt these skills in other modules in the management school, so I've provided them with quite a unique set of skills. And others were asking if they could use it for interviews and use their presentation for interviews, but there are some copyright issues, aren't there potentially?
Potentially showing the video to a wider audience,
Yeah.
because a lot of the digital marketing and videos are basically using copyrighted material. There's the argument about whether they can show that to a wider audience and effect the profit from that, which can't be done. So some of the videos use very short snippets, which are fair dealings, of using it for examination purposes is okay, but showing it to a wider audience, it gets into murky territories there, so we have to be very careful about showing
Yeah.
this.
Also, just a word about submission as well. So submission was actually quite tricky because mole was an option, wasn't it? I think when I'd first started to think about, okay, what are the logistics of this? How do I kind of get the students to submit? Because it's a 20-minute video and that's like quite a big file size. So first of all, Mole didn't have the capacity at the time, did it?
They're very large videos.
They were very large videos, and so Mole would crash if the students were to upload the video onto Mole. Google Drive, there were issues to do with Google Drive, but I can't remember why we didn't opt for that one.
It was in the shortlist. So
It was a short loop.
Oh
no, well, Google Drive, we didn't choose that because submission time. So it was quite key that a key criteria was that they had to submit before midday, and on Google Drive we couldn't. I don't think we could.
And it's to do with setting up within the department.
Yes, on setting up. Okay, so there were other issues there. So the easiest option that we found was that USBs. So we gave each group a USB. They collected that from our central student experience office, and then I had those, and then that's how we did the submission. But actually what was quite interesting, and I wish I'd done this now, is given them video feedback. So I gave them written feedback, and so this year that's something that I'd like to implement. I just felt that last year there were so many things going on because it was a new module, it was a video presentation which was something new to the management school, that I didn't get a chance then to explore giving video feedback. And that's probably something that I'll talk to you about later on. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so I've been running for the first time this year a science communication module in animal and plant sciences. It's directed at our level 2 students, so a kind of step before these guys. And I originally came up with the idea in 2014. It's taken it this long to get off the ground, really, so it has been a bit of a fight, but that's mainly because I was trying to set it up before this place was here, so I had a few struggles of my own there. I wanted to get something into our curriculum that gave students the opportunity to develop their communication skills, really. I had a lot of tutees wanting to go down that kind of route, whether it was kind of radio, TV, or just written communication, and they hadn't really built up a portfolio by the time they got to the end of their degree. So I wanted to build something in that gave them that opportunity, but also allowed us to develop those skills that we want in our graduates anyway, so group work, communication, presenting, all those kind of things. So we ran it as a voluntary competition first off, and we had no equipment, no computers, no money to buy either of those, and I also wasn't allowed near the credit-bearing kind of portion of our degree because it was a bit new and a bit different. So I ran it as kind of like this proof of concept thing. I got people in the department who had interest in the media or experience with the media in to talk to the students, give them a little bit of advice. We had some money left over from an essay competition that no one had entered because our students apparently don't want to write essays in their spare time. So I was able to use that as a bit of a temptation to get the students in. But possibly our most valuable asset back then, and potentially it still is a very valuable asset, is one of our graduates, Matt Pitts-Tucker, he did one of the degrees in our department and is now a freelance producer director, agreed to come and help me build this up for free initially, which was really, really kind of him, and I couldn't really have done it without that initially. So we ran it as a competition, there was an enormous amount of student interest, it went very, very successfully, but because they had to do it on their own equipment, the output was limited. The students got a lot out of it because they learned about communication and communicating science and all that kind of stuff and embedding their knowledge. But the actual output at the end we couldn't really use because the sound quality wasn't brilliant, the editing wasn't brilliant, all those kind of things. So I was a bit stuck at that point because I was like, there's loads of student interest, I really want to turn this into a module, but there was kind of like there's a good few amount of challenges. Around the same time, I got to know the Enterprise Academy, and it kind of fit in with all their capabilities that they're trying to embed in curriculum too, things like taking action and collaboration and creativity and innovation, among others. And they heard about the module and decided to support it, and then kind of put me in touch with Chris, who I saw earlier, he's at the back, and that meeting was a bit of a revelation because then I just heard about all this amazing production equipment we've got here, and suddenly everything fell into place because we had the facilities, we had the training, we had a place that the students could come and develop these projects, and we had student interest, and Matt was on board, and the enterprise people gave me some money so I could pay Matt. So everything kind of fell into place and it was brilliant. So we ran the course for the first time this year during the Easter holidays. So it's a kind of intensive field work, field course type format, because I think taking the students away from their timetabled terms is actually quite good in something like this. Our students they don't do anything this kind of creative throughout the rest of their curriculum. So by getting them into one room 9 to 5, or actually a lot longer, some of them chose to stay, and just getting them completely embedded in thinking about their films and getting creative actually worked really, really well. And they were quite pleased with it too. And it ran really well. The students produced, we had 21 students enrolled this year, which I think was a really nice number to start it. And what I'd actually say is that I'd probably keep the numbers down for this type of module in the future. The way we ran it was very feedback intensive. So Matt and I followed them around while they were filming out and about in Sheffield. So it meant that we could give them on-the-spot feedback continually throughout the week. It meant that we could check out the quality assurances, we could check that they had their information right, and if they had any logistic problems or technical problems, we could point them in the right direction. We also integrated some workshops from the Enterprise Academy, things like working to a brief, producing a pitch, those kind of things, which went down quite well. We had a seminar from Mike Dilger, so with a little bit of their Enterprise grant, I was able to get a wildlife presenter in, which the students absolutely loved. So he came and gave a department seminar, which meant the rest of the department could get involved as well. And he spent a day at the beginning of the course running through a very kind of short exercise with the students that they had to do within camera. So they just used their mobile phones to create a very short news item, which wasn't assessed, but it meant that they could make a lot of mistakes and we could tell them where they were going wrong, what was really good. And then when they went into their final kind of video making portion of the course, it ended up a lot better because they knew about those mistakes already. We had a lot of variety of videos, so you saw one in the film that was based on squirrels. They were out and about, so they used the lab filming as well. We had one group who used the TV studio with the green screen. We had quite a lot of interviews. And all the editing and the introduction to the software was all done by Jessie. And I think it came up a lot in the feedback that help was really, really useful. So they were in here a lot and they asked you a lot of questions, but you were there and you were able to help them, which is brilliant because it's not something that I'm an expert in and not necessarily something that I would have been able to help them with very easily. So it was a big success, and we've got 5 films out of it now, which will end up on iTunes U. So the students can refer back to them for their portfolios when they're using them for applications. We can also use them for kind of departmental and university publication and kind of open days, things like that, which was really good. The assessment was a bit of a struggle at the beginning because it's so different to other stuff that we do in the department. It's normally we're used to writing, marking essays and written work. So we put together various mark schemes in collaboration with Matt, who was the ex-graduate that came and helped me. And 65% of the mark was actually on their video. So we came up with a mark scheme that incorporated things like scientific content, because obviously that's quite useful for us to be able to judge, but accuracy, fit to brief storytelling, whether it was fit to their target audience, which we gave them. They had to make it for a tea time show, show on the television, so not necessarily a scientific audience. I also judged things like creativity and technical skill and editing and presentation. And because I wasn't the only one marking this, we got several different people to mark it, Matt being one of them. I felt that that was kind of an authentic type mark scheme for a project like this. Other parts of their assessment were taken up by, they had a peer assessment bit, so this didn't really reveal any surprises, but if there was one group member that wasn't quite pulling their weight, we could account for that. 5% of their mark was down to all the copyright paperwork that they had to hand in. So right at the beginning of the course, we gave them quite a stern lecture on copyright, what they were allowed to include and what they weren't. They had to produce all the permissions for music, the images and interviews and anything else that they had included that wasn't theirs. And finally, 20% of their mark was down to a pitch that they did midweek. So while they were coming up with their ideas, they then had to pitch it to us in a kind of pre-production meeting. So we sat down around a table and they had to convince us basically that it was a good idea, which threw them out of their comfort zone because they like standing in front of slides and presenting. And we had a few complaints actually that they had to like sit and actually just talk to us like people. But I think that's actually a good thing, that they had to just sit down and have a conversation rather than presenting like a science presentation. So despite the complaints, I'm going to keep that in next year. So that's how the module was assessed, and it will be running again next year. My only problem is next year I've got too many students signed up to it, so I'm going to have to think of a way of selecting them. So, yeah.